There we go. Okay, so welcome. This is my info session on the course I'm offering in January about becoming more than your job title. I've got a lot of information to share because I want this to be really rich and helpful for you to understand what the heck is in my book and what do I study and why am I so passionate. Mostly because the journey I've been on, both for my own professional discovery and unpacking, like, why am I stuck in my career and feeling lost and uncertain, and I don't know how to get the right job, or people don't see me the way I want to be seen. From that personal discovery, I sort of unlocked this huge aha that people can be more than their job title. But more than that, if you have many hats, you are intersecting and integrating identities together in a whole new way. That might sound like jargon to you right now, but essentially, and James, I'm making sure I'm on the right view. This is my fault. I'm just pinning the video differently. There we go. So essentially, I found this concept of being a hybrid professional. And ever since I started sharing it, it has just been resonating far and wide, because the terms of being a jack of all trades and such are just kind of old, and they're not really doing much for people in terms of getting communicated. So let me share what I've got prepared for you today. One second. There we go. So I'm going to go through a whole overview of some of the research, background, and then a lot about the course and what's in store in January. So first of all, if you have a phone or anything nearby, just, put distractions away so you can get the most out of today. And you probably want a notebook or pen with you so you can take some information down, because I'm going to cover a lot in this. So this image right here, I like to start with, because what the heck is this? If you've ever seen this in a grocery store, I would be surprised. It doesn't exist. And yet this is this notion of how a lot of us are feeling in our work. I like to use food as examples because it's so concrete. But if you are a combination of things, you become something entirely new. That's what's going on with our professional identity. So taking a tomato and a cabbage and mashing it together is not just a tomato plus a cabbage. How do we communicate this? Because this is freaking cool and important. And that's the kinds of tools that we work on in my course, Become More Than Your Title. So 3 warm-up questions today. We've got a small group here live, so I'm going to go through them fast. First, where are you from? Put it in the chat. We'll see where people are from. That's an easy one. So the second one is going to be, in 10 words or less, what's on your mind right now? What are you frustrated with? What are you currently facing in your career? We've got a couple people jumping in, so I'm going to slow down for a second so they can see what's going on. Welcome. There we go. Hi. So we're just in the warm-up part of the presentation. In the chat, I want you to add what you are frustrated with or thinking about in your career right now. Some people are going through transitions. Some people are just in a deep reflective mode of like, I know I want to do something else, or I know I have more value to bring, but I don't know how to talk about myself. Like, that could be a frustration. Or just the fact that you are reinventing and reassessing your beliefs and what you stand for and what you need in your work. Really, all answers are fine. It's just kind of for us to get a sense of what people are feeling in the room. So some of this balance going from different stages of our career. Thanks for sharing that. Good to see you, Victoria. I know people are in job search mode, or they're confused on even where to start looking, because what does a job title mean? A job title can mean 10 different things to 10 different recruiters. So the landscape, we know, with jobs is really changing. So here's my third question for you to get started. In the chat, what is your professional identity? If I was to ask you directly that question, we were meeting at a coffee shop, how would you answer that? I'll give you a moment, because that one's a little different, right? And I tend to see some similar patterns in people's answers. So I'm curious what people here are going to respond with. Okay, great. So some clear words: a designer, an educator, facilitator. Perfect. Communications professional. Awesome. Thank you. So here's what's happening when I usually ask people, what is your professional identity? They actually give answers like skills and domains and job titles. Those are the things you do, or they are what your formal job title is. But professional identity is not your job title and it's not your skills. Identity is how you see yourself in your work. So even just having that level of understanding about ourselves is not common. Yet that is the cornerstone for us starting to make sense of ourselves and putting ourselves into some picture where then we can start telling better stories and understanding how to communicate the value. Once we know who we are, we can explain why we do what we do. So that's why professional identity is such a big deal in starting this work. So here's 4 reasons this course may be for you, hopefully is. First, for people that are struggling to answer, what do you do? Maybe you're changing your answer to this question all this time, or you get anxious about it, or you just like really avoid that question. That used to be me. This course is really helping you find the confidence and an answer that is more consistent and more authentic to you, no matter who you meet, because you decide your professional identity. So we really unlock that in this course. If you're not being seen for your full value at work, right? People just see you as one thing or another, but you're like, I have all these parts I'm not being seen for. That's also what we'll unpack. You wear so many hats, it confuses people. Maybe you're one of those people that does everything and you're like, it depends on the minute of the day. That also can mean that you're so kind of overwhelming or there's just too much going on. You can't even explain what these hats are. And the last one is if you've worked with another career development professional, like a resume writer or a coach, and you just didn't feel satisfied. I met a woman who was on her 3rd or 4th resume writer, and she kept thinking, oh, this next person is going to be the one, and the next person will be better. And it just wasn't the case. She wasn't really figuring out who she was because she didn't know that was her problem. She just thought the piece of paper was going to make her look right. So I believe this work on figuring out identity comes before resume, comes before job searches, comes before interviews. You've got to know how to talk about who you are to bring out all the answers to those other things. So here's some questions that this course is going to help you answer. Who are you really when you do what you do for work? So it's not just like, hey, nice to meet you, Sarabeth. Like, you know, you're that designer girl. It's like, no, I'm so much more than a designer, right? But how do I communicate that? Who are you at the intersection of your professional identities? That is really the foundational research question I've been studying for almost a decade. This idea of intersections and understanding deeply and specifically is such a critical part of learning who we are. So that is a question we will answer. And then why does that matter? I believe in the intersection is your hybrid expertise and value, and we're all trying to find our value prop. You can't just say you wear a lot of hats. And lastly, how can you communicate this hybrid expertise you have? How can you do that more effectively to attract the right career opportunities for you? Because I believe that intersectional point where you wear a lot of hats and they start to cross over and not just cross, but actually are merging together. I call that your hybrid expertise. When you can define that, like I see this aha light bulb go off for people, but then they're like, oh my gosh, that's me. That's the me I've been waiting to find. And it's like, great. How do we help you share that so other people see that too? Because it's all about the language we use and the stories we share. So unlocking this hybrid expertise and a way to share it then helps you find the right career opportunities that are matching that really fit you because you can say what you need. And it also gets us past this point of just being generic or confusing. So here's what I'm going to cover during the rest of today's presentation. 3 of the biggest mistakes I'm seeing workers do again and again. I'm going to give you a little more background in me and how I started here, and then what a hybrid professional is so you can track with that. Lots of stories and examples so you can see how this work has actually worked for people. Then I'll go into the goals of the course, the benefits, the results you'll achieve, give you an overview of the curriculum, and then I'll save time for Q&A. So here are the 3 biggest mistakes workers are making. And I know this because I've been talking to hundreds of people and doing so many webinars and presentations, and these are just common patterns. One, saying you're a jack of all trades, or I wear a lot of hats, and compartmentalizing yourself. So many of us are doing this. And this is just becoming it's just so common is what I'm trying to say. So therefore, nobody really stands out. Nobody's really specific. And noticing a question in here, Victoria, can I come back to that at the end? I think I can answer it better when I can take a pause. The second thing people are doing is looking for external validation instead of internal. So typically we used job titles as a way to show rank and hierarchy and our positional status. But the workforce is full of people with job titles that are inflated and degrees and certificates that may or may not mean the same thing. There's just a lot of dilution going on. So you've actually got to go inside of yourself to say, who am I? How do I see myself? And what do I feel I am? Not just what did some employer name me to be. So this idea of internal validation is missing. That's the problem people are doing. And then number 3 is using traditional career steps, ladders, and processes that were designed for a different era. We really are in this paradigm shift. I'm seeing it more and more where old generations, are just thinking that career is a linear trajectory, and the younger generations and the newer workforce, it is all about zigzagging and job hopping and being iterative and moving in any fashion you want, which doesn't make it easy to understand all that complexity. So when we move in these progressions that are not linear, suddenly we need new tools. And that's what I've been designing, is a different way to help frame how do we look at a career. So traditional way of thinking about work, I think a lot of you have heard this. This is sort of the old advice. You just need to find your gift and share your gift with the world. And somewhere in the middle, the two will meet and you can get paid for it. I think this is fine advice and it's still relevant, but it's missing something. So here's the better way I like to think about work. Work is a 3-legged stool. Your career has 3 parts to it. One is your passion. What do you love to do, right? You've got to enjoy your work. The other is your purpose. Why do you do what you do? But the third leg of the stool is your identity. Who are you and what do you call yourself when you're following your passion and purpose? You need to figure out a name for that, and it is not just your job title. Those 3 work in really beautiful harmony, and that's why they all matter together. So a little bit more about my background. If you had met me about even just 10 years ago, I was sort of like this. I was moving in between all kinds of spaces. I'd be facilitating one minute and I taught art another moment. And then I was presenting things at design competitions, and people just saw me with all these different identities. And I knew they were all part of me, but I couldn't explain it. And I really felt trapped and pigeonholed. I was only getting hired for one thing at a time. And yet my experience, my lived experience of the world was these things are inseparable. They make me me. But I kept leaving jobs and quitting and finding new jobs because I'd get tired of wearing one hat. And in order to find my fulfillment, I'd go to another job. That job hopping just is exhausting, right? And it makes you feel like you don't know where you belong. So I was having a professional identity crisis and didn't realize it. And I thought, what is wrong with me? What was actually happening when I looked at the best examples of my work products, I was creating things nobody else was making. So this is where we start to find the value of your hybridity is in the things you do that you're taking for granted. So I made this landscape map and I researched all this data and I made this visual graphic, and it was educational. It helped people with wayfinding. It opened up better questions for partnerships. People were hanging it on their wall. We couldn't keep copies in stock. People were like, Sarabeth, this is incredible. Like nobody ever thought to do this before. I was like, that's cool. Like, I just kind of put it together. This is what I do. But if we freeze frame and look at this more closely, this is me and my hybridity. I was not conscious of it. My hybrid identity is comprised of 4 professional identities: being an artist, being an educator, being a researcher, and being a designer. Because I've gone to art school for undergrad and grad degrees, I got my PhD in education. So all of these identities have combined in me And this is how I create new ways to see data through visualization that's also educational. When I had this aha moment of, oh my gosh, this is me doing things in a new way, that's when I finally started to unpack and see myself. But it took a lot of these tools that I give to people now through my books and courses, I had to figure out on my own. So my professional identity crisis is when I fell apart and I had to put myself back together again to find the integration point of why do I have all these different hats and identities? What do they do together? And that led me to doing a lot of interviews and observations of professionals in all different careers and industries. I've talked to physical therapists, financial analysts, dancers, doctors, like hybrid professionals are in all spaces. And what's happening, you can see in this fish human image behind me, my TEDx talk, that's how people feel in their work, but they can't express it. Being this hybrid creature. And that's the beauty, is that we are not just a little bit of one thing, a little bit of other, we're fused into something altogether. So we get the opportunity to design and invent a way to explain that to the world that is real to us. And this is my hybrid elevator pitch, which is the capstone way I help people express who they are. So you can see here, Venn diagrams are really important to the work, and we explore this in the course. What are your core, I call them primary professional identities. I mentioned mine are being an artist, educator, researcher, designer. So who am I in that intersection is a term I created for myself. It's a creative disruptor. And so that's my hybrid expertise. So my elevator pitch, when I meet people or I'm networking or I'm doing interviews or applying to jobs, I say I'm Sarabeth and I'm a hybrid professional. I call myself a creative disruptor because I work at the intersection of being an artist, educator, researcher, and designer. And this enables me to create innovation strategies that radically connect people and resources in new ways. So that methodology is a 3-part sequence that works. People are using this to talk about themselves, and they're seeing results of intrigue and better questions and new relationships and standing out, because this helps show you have confidence and knowledge about who you are and how you do what you do. So all of this information I ended up writing into a book and a workbook. And now today, as a researcher, I'm both a hybrid. I still work in hybrid roles because I love applying my hybridity. But as a researcher, I'm working between personal branding, career development, and identity research. And I have not found anybody else playing in that space, doing it the way I'm doing it, because it's a unique recipe. And this is where I explore the combination of hybrid professional identity, and I'm bringing that back to you. So here's what a hybrid professional is. There are 3 types of professionals in the workforce, and we really only talk about 2. So singularity is the first type. These are experts and generalists. Typically, that's what we refer to them as. Multiplicity is the second type. That's where people wear a lot of hats. They have many identities. They could be an expert in 3 different things. It's not just that they're generalists, but we have so many terms for this group. We're missing a term for people that are more than this. So anyone that starts to combine and intersect and work in interdisciplinary ways, that is hybridity. So my framework is that there are 3 types of workers in the workforce: those with singularity, multiplicity, and hybridity. We need all 3 on teams. We need them to work together because they actually support high-performing companies and organizations when you have the right ratios. But if we don't hire people for each of these 3 types of identity, and if we don't educate and build enough awareness of which one do you fall into, this is where it becomes confusing. People feel disengaged, people start underperforming, and they leave jobs because they're a hybrid who's being told you need to be an expert and do one thing, or you're a generalist and you're being told you need to be more of a hybrid who's integrating, and everything goes wonky. So this to me is really important for us to know about ourselves and help employers know as they hire new people. So the definition of a hybrid professional is someone who integrates different professional identities together and works at that intersection. The integration is the key difference, aside from separation, which is multiplicity. And again, I've mentioned food analogies, but they work so well. A pizza is an example of a hybrid food combination, right? We put the ingredients together and they melt and they get juicy and you eat a delicious bite and everything's combined. You can't really separate, like it's a whole new flavor. But if we ate the red bell pepper and then the bacon and then the basil, that would be multiplicity, one at a time. So a hybrid is that fusion, and it's so much better. It's the sum is bigger than the parts. So going back to that strange fruit vegetable in the beginning, a tomato would be singularity, tomato and cabbage is multiplicity, and this hybrid cabbage tomato thing that we need to name, that's the difference of hybridity. And I like to use this too as a product example because people think a Swiss Army knife is like being a hybrid, but Swiss Army knives are multi-tools, right? So if you use one identity at a time, that's not being a hybrid. The hybrid is when things are completely interconnected, like a Camelback, where the water bottle backpack is a whole new product. So some things hybrids are really good at. I bet these will resonate with you a little bit. One is developing new processes and products, or trend spotting, that pattern recognizer, because you're seeing between different disciplines and domains. They're good at translating. They can take an idea in one field and go, oh, but what if it goes over here instead? Being chameleons and shapeshifters, seeing things others don't perceive, creating efficiencies between teams, and breaking the status quo. Hybrids are amazing silo busters. They were really good at working between teams or ideas or disciplines. Anytime you're in that messy gray space, that is the hybridity. So if this feels like you, then you're in the right spot. And then things hybrids are bad at is articulating who they are and what they do, right? Because they don't know how to talk about that hybridity. They're like, oh, I do some marketing and I do some sales and I do some coding and I do some music writing, but I don't know what that makes me. So that's why they don't really know what their true value and expertise is, because they're sort of like, it's all of this. And then staying engaged at one job for a long duration, hybrids are bouncing around a lot because they haven't found the way to explore and embrace that hybridity, or helping employers understand how to embrace it too. And then ultimately figuring out where they belong. I have seen that when you gain clarity of how your identities fit together, then you can start talking to people about the kinds of jobs and works you need. And then I just want to reinforce that people are hiring for hybrid professionals. This example is a real job posting. It's one of the most explicit postings I found, but I have a whole bank of postings that are implied that they need a hybrid. So this innovation strategist role right out of the gate says, we need a hybrid thinker. Like they're asking for hybridity. And then I love the job description that says, we're looking for people who are one part humanist and one part technologist and one part capitalist, a designer with an MBA and a degree in anthropology. Like they really play with all the ingredients that they need. And they're saying, we need someone who is this recipe. That is a beautiful way to talk about hybridity in with as much clarity as possible. And you can start to see these people do exist. If you ask for the different parts and someone who is working between them, more people have very diverse work experience. So it's very possible to find hybrid jobs. So here's some more stories and examples, and then I'll get into the course more specifically. First of all, this is the landscape. I'm sure this is not a surprise to any of you, but if you look on LinkedIn, the headers people are using under their name are crazy. Like people are using a lot of similar language, strategists and coaches and, consultants. They're using a lot of different forms of grammar, commas, slashes, plus signs, because they're trying to show the expansiveness of what they can bring to the table. But that's just not working. So on one side, we have to remember there are algorithms in LinkedIn, so keywords are being searched on you. But the other side is humans are reading this too. And when I start seeing all kinds of familiar language, I call that personal branding, and just a lot of grammar, it makes me wonder, does this person know who they are? Like, I don't really understand how they can be a founder, strategy nerd, and digital mad scientist. But certain people are starting to play with hybrid titles or new ways to catch your attention. Like Brittany is the chief fire starter at Fireside. Technically, she's the CEO founder, but that's not how she led in. She had a different hook on her identity. Jennifer calls herself people operations extraordinaire. Now, some of these are maybe a little cute or not quite, landing on you yet, but the theory of what's happening here is on the right track. And that's part of how I work with people is how do we test and work on your hybrid title in a way that catches people's interest, but you also have to support it with familiar language as well. It's a both and. So I have a lot of these stories, if you watch my LinkedIn, on people that are somewhere either in the emerging hybrid space or more established. So I just wanted to point that out as a resource. And then here's an example, starting with someone pretty famous on how hybrid professional identity is working for them. And then I'm going to give you a couple more just general public examples. So Chip Wilson is the founder of Lululemon. But before he figured out that career and started that business, he was in retail, he worked in sports specifically, and he also had a lot of knowledge in fabric. So he was combining those three identity sets together. And the question is, what does that make him? What professional value does he have there? Well, out of that combination, he designed athleisure. We didn't even know that term a few years ago. It was a weird hybrid term. But Lululemon is a way to wear athletic clothes in the studio and on the streets. And that was a need that Chip was able to see that no one else saw because of his background in fabric and sports and retail. So when you combine your identities, you can have breakthrough ideas, you can come up with new products, you can start new companies, you can provide new resources if you're an employee in a company. So much happens when your identities are allowed to combine. So here's Susanna. She's someone I worked with recently. She came through my course, and we all get that question like, hey, tell us about yourself, right? That could be in an interview or just during dinner. And if Susanna was asked that question, here's how she might have answered it. She says, I love to organize information, analyze data. I like to create clarity, do educational design, make things aesthetic, and wrangle people. Well, what does that really tell us about Susanna? She just starts to sound like a lot of different things, and there's nothing wrong, but we don't get a good picture of like, what is Susanna really good at? What makes her her, right? What's that unique factor? So if we look at what Susanna does, because I do a lot of this work in the course as reflection and getting a lot of metacognitive awareness of what you're doing when you're really doing your work. So if we looked at Susanna just from a distance, she's a learning designer. She was creating courses and doing content. And yet she's like, that's not me. I'm so much more than that. And if you compare Susanna as a learning designer to the thousands of other learning designers out there, she's doing it in her own way, but we are stuck at the wrong level of language. So we unpacked Susanna's primary professional identities, and we realized one circle in her Venn diagram is being an educational designer. That was very core to her. Another circle is her being an analyst. And the third is an organizer of ideas. And I love how that one is framed because it's not sort of the standard language we use on identity. She kind of created her own little new way of saying, I'm an organizer of ideas. So she felt like she owned those. She's like, these are the parts of me that make me me. Great. So who is she in that intersection? Well, we unpacked and had her really go into stories and talk about when she was really in that flow state and what was happening and how she was doing learning design and so forth. And what came out of that was all kinds of rich language and clues of who she was. And that gave us the inspiration. I call it like the emerging gold mine of your hybrid words. And we found out she is a process illuminator. And even just saying that out loud, it lands and it feels different. You can see, oh my gosh, a learning designer versus a process illuminator. Like the process illuminator has more of that clarity and just novelty. And so Susanna just got a new job, actually. You know, the job market right now is very competitive, and she was applying to another university to work in their learning design department. And she talked about being a process illuminator during her interviews because she knew that was her new sort of hybrid lens, and that was a value add. And she had practiced it, and she had the stories behind it to reinforce it. And she has just accepted that role. So even if you work in an organization, like her job title is still learning designer, she can augment that and almost expand what that means by saying, yeah, I'm Susanna, the learning designer, but I actually call myself a process illuminator because da 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 da. So it adds a very just powerful way to sort of open up people's minds and eyes to see you the way you want to be seen. So John, really quickly, like I start with like where he was when he came in. He was a project manager. We worked on his primary professional identities. He was a translator, a people talent developer, and a strategist. And eventually we found out he's really a attention methodologist. And you could just feel how it like opened up his eyes to have that permission of, wow, that is really what I've been trying to say all these years. And Nina, she was an adjunct professor. We know a lot of people with a title like professor or teacher. Turns out she was really a photojournalist from her former career and experience. She saw herself as an educator and a mentor. And what was interesting with Nina, as we were doing the process of finding the right hybrid job title, we were stuck on perspective. We were talking a lot about how she sees and helps people unpack perspective. And she was like a perspective taker or perspective changer. And we were kind of brainstorming there. But then eventually she's like, you know, Sarabeth, perspective's not rolling off my tongue. It's just not exactly right. It's close, but it's not there. And we tend to get to that 90% mark. And then it's like, oh, we just have to finesse it. And finally, this is where the power of the collaborative group comes in. Someone who had been listening to Nina brainstorm was like, you know, I think you're more of a lens shifter instead of a perspective shifter. And you could just see that light bulb moment. I'm feeling the chills right now. Because as a photojournalist, right, she's using lenses from cameras, but also those mental and worldview lenses. So when Nina said this out loud, cultural lens shifter, she's like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's what I am. It's really cool. Okay, so let's get into the course. By the end, here's what you will know. So starting in January, this is a process where you will get that clarity on what are your core professional identities instead of just listing all of your hats. You will know the unique value of who you are in your intersections. That's that space where your identities are integrating. You'll be able to know what to call your hybrid professional identity. Mine is creative disruptor. Nina's was cultural lens shifter. And how to claim and own that hybrid expertise. So when you're talking to people or writing cover letters or doing whatever professional networking, you will feel it. You'll be ready and excited to share it. And your not just passion will come through, but the kind of the bold energy of, wow, like this person has something that nobody else has and they can articulate it. And oh my gosh, I need to work with them. It really just sets that fire. So you get a ton of goodies working with me. I've been doing this really the courses for over a year now, and I've been moving through all different models. Like I love learning design personally, but I keep tweaking and making it better because I can just see what's working for people. So I have all kinds of content, all these little videos, like 3 to 10-minute videos on Teachable. And those are 2 online courses I started and I've been adding content to. So you get access to the online content so you can watch me when you are ready and go through the activities and rewatch things. But then you're getting weekly live sessions with me. So that's what makes this more magical, that every week we meet for an hour and a half in a group. And the activities that you've done for pre-work or homework, we get to go into more, and I get to give you guidance and I get to ask you questions, and you get to play off of each other in real time, because that's really where I see people make the most progress. So then you'll have a weekly assignment. I'll go into the actual week by week curriculum in a minute. And as I mentioned, the 2 online courses you get access to are Decode Your Professional Identity and Brand Your Hybrid Professional Identity, because people usually need to do one and then the other. I have a Slack channel, so you'll be in a virtual space so you can communicate with me and other people in the group, you know, asynchronously, keep that conversation going. I have so many custom tools. I just keep creating more and more ways to help people work through this whole Venn diagram and intersectional identity, because no one else has this material. So everything here is research-based, one of a kind, and very relevant because I know it's helping other people make progress. You'll also get a signed copy of my book. I will mail you a paperback, and you will get a digital copy of the workbook, which has a lot of the activities. And then the workbook is supported by the videos, and really just probably more things that I can't even fit into this slide. So here's what the curriculum looks like. In the workbook, I have 5 steps. And so the curriculum kind of maps to this. Because it's live and I like to customize things with the people in the group, I might be picking and plucking tools out of sequence, but it's because I want things to be um, as relevant as possible. But essentially, this is the order of how things flow, starting with where you are, doing some of that baseline check-in. Step 2 is drilling down, getting into the professional identities, looking at skills versus identities. Step 3 is investigating these intersections. That's the hard Venn diagram work. By step 4, we're starting to hybridize and name your hybridity. And step 5 is owning it. But the journey is a bit of an emotional process too. And so you go from your old identity, then step 2 is that drilling down and finding your core professional identities. That usually feels really fun and easy and enlivening. But by step 3, when we get to the intersections, people go, oh my gosh, I am so confused, or this is like nothing I've ever tried before. And that's okay. I expect some of that tension and confusion to come up for people. So we actually spend more time in steps 3 and 4. 4 is when you start to come up with the new hybrid identity words. 5 is iterative. So we go through a lot of versions. It takes a lot of testing and creative writing to find your hybrid title. And then step 6 is that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm ready to use it and move forward. So here's the week by week breakdown. Week 1 is sort of intro, decoding who you are. That usually moves pretty fast and it feels like a great entry point. Week 2, we start getting into more storytelling and a lot of metacognitive reflection in your intersections. And so that's where people start to get a little stuck, and that's normal. So weeks 3 and 4, we start to work on the branding of your hybrid identity. And I like to spend, you can tell that's about 50% of the time in that space. And I like doing the live sessions once a week because it gives you time to come together, sort of ask questions, brainstorm, and then go away, play on your own, and then come back to the table and get kind of that back and forth. It's so intense when I've tried doing this workshop. It used to be a weekend crash course, and people were like, I love the tools, but I need more time to think. So I've spaced it apart this way to give more of that personal reflection time. In between these sessions, you'll see there's a monthly jam session. So once you're in this course, you can keep coming back into this community of other hybrid professionals because other people are ahead of you in this work, or they're trying new things and you can ask them questions. So I like to kind of give these moments of more community exploration. So Michelle, who's gone through this, she said the results have been pretty magical. She felt like an alien at first when she called herself a conscious evolutionary designer, because yeah, that feels pretty foreign. But she tried it and she met this woman who deeply resonated with it. She said it was kismet. And now when I get asked what I do for work, she said people's ears perk up. They ask me to repeat myself because they want to know more. It's working. I think Michelle was kind of nervous and a little shy at first, but she's like, holy cow, this is changing the way people see me. Bruno read my book first and then worked with me with the techniques. And he said it greatly contributed to his success in finding and accepting a new role because it was through these suggestions that he was able to consolidate his past work and realized, I'm skipping down a little bit, but he needed a job that involved communications and therapy and education, which was a little bit of an odd combination. And he found a job that matched that. And he didn't know that was the kind of job he needed. So that's why it was so impactful for him. And then Adam is a designer, and so many people call themselves designers. So he rebranded himself and his studio as a hybrid studio. So he promotes that hybridity, that onlyness as his key value. And he said, I knew I had been combining fine art and traditional graphic design. There are plenty of other designers and artists who do exactly what I do. He knows that, but he couldn't find many people who were talking about it this way or leading with that. So that was his point of difference or differentiation. And so this is a photo from his website, and you can see he calls it in the headline, a hybrid creative studio focused on the artful implementation of strategic design. And then I love his little sentence after that. We are brand designers, lettering artists, and mural painters, combining intentional design thinking with fine art techniques. We help communicate the honest stories of eclectic brands. That's essentially his version of a hybrid elevator pitch, but he did it more for his company. But he's a small shop. He's like one person with some contractors and freelancers. So essentially, he is his own brand. And I love how this was such a big deal when he realized how to bring this into his business. So some notes on the timeline. Applications are open until January 7th. And then on the 9th, I will release pre-work for people so that you've got about a week ahead of time to start looking at those materials. Monday is January 17th. That's onboarding. It's optional. Anyone that just needs a little more orientation into what we're about to do. And then the live sessions, the 4 of them, are all on Tuesdays, and they are 1 p.m. to 2:30 Eastern time. So we'll do those a couple weeks in a row. On the 31st, I'll offer an optional office hours. That's just kind of to ping pong and have some additional time if people need it. And then you can see by February 7th, there's an optional hybrid jam session where other people who have been in this work are going to come in, and we all just kind of get to jam together and talk about what we need and brainstorm on our hybridity. And then we'll wrap up by February 11th. And you will still have access to the online courses, but the cohort side of this will be finished after that. So are you ready to become more than your job title? If you join now, so the full price for this course and all of the things I've just explained is $749. But if you apply by midnight tonight, November 30th, I'm offering integrity-based pricing. It's been something I've been doing just in November to my community that really is reaching out and coming to info sessions. And what integrity-based pricing means is I want to make this course accessible. I know the last year and a half has been hard with COVID. It's been challenging for me in so many ways. And so this is my gift back to people that I want you to be able to have this experience. But if $749 is too high of a value, what do you value this at? So all you have to do is apply by tonight on Maven. Go to maven.com/more-than-my-title/become-more. And there's a final question on the application that says, is there anything else you want to know or add? I can't remember. It's the last question. And just explain in that box what price you value this at and why that is the price that works for you. And then if you're accepted, you will get to pay that price. So remember the bonus, there's other opportunities to work with people beyond the cohort, because some people will not have everything fully figured out in a month. I think you're going to get 90% of the way, but if people are still on the fence or still testing, I would just want you to know the pressure is off, that you will still have time in this community to keep practicing and collaborating with us. And this is a game changer. Nobody else has this material. People that do personal branding or just career development, this is a whole combination between those landscapes that's so much value for your value. And this will completely change how you see yourself. I just hear that time and time again, that people are like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been waiting for. I didn't know how to talk about myself this way. I didn't know I could be this. You've given me permission, and I have tools to use to actually bring this into the world. And it just changes how you communicate. If you can explain who you are, then other people can see that too. Otherwise, you're kind of at the mercy of, if people are telling you you're something, you don't know how else to explain that you are or aren't that. You've got to do this work internally on yourself first. And ultimately, the goal of this, right, is that you start to attract the kinds of careers and jobs and pathways that you've been looking for. It doesn't have to be either or. It doesn't mean you have to hide or dismiss parts of yourself to fit a box you think you have to fit. When you can get this internal understanding, you have new leverage and you walk into your career differently, and then new things start to appear because you're seeing your career differently. So that is where I'm going to wrap up today. Again, name your own price with integrity-based pricing, I think, is a pretty special way to give you a very unique opportunity to join me. And maven.com is where you will apply and send that in by tonight if you want that. You can also email me, Sarabeth at morethanmytitle.com, if you really have a burning question and you just need to talk to me. I'm happy to answer that. So time for Q&A. And yeah, jump on in. If you have questions, I will stay on and talk with anybody who has something on your mind. I think, Vicki, you might have had something earlier in the chat, if you want to bring that back up.
Good evening. Yeah, I had two questions. And one was you were talking about career ladders and wearing lots of hats. And this was a way in the past that people were able to show their value a lot and grow their careers so that people, the decision makers, could see, oh, you can do that too. Oh, you can stand on one foot and hop up and down and scratch your head at the same time. Wow, we want that kind of person. So we're kind of wondering that this was the way in the past, and maybe the courses you get into just, I'm so stuck. I'm so stuck in that model that what's the transition? And related to that is I hear people talking about themselves as, oh, I'm a unicorn, which means, I can do everything. I can not only hop up and down on one foot and scratch my head, but I can write a New York Times bestseller at the same time with my left hand, So they're kind of related questions.
So what I'm hearing is, how is this different than kind of the old traditional ways people have been doing career, research or growth? So my sense has been, I'm going to start with my own story. When I was really stuck, because I've hit multiple professional identity crises and didn't know I was having a professional identity crisis because no one talks about professional identity, first of all. But when I was stuck, people would say, well, maybe you're just burned out, take a break. Or, oh, do you know what you're really interested in? I was like, yeah, I know my interests. They're like, oh, you've got to choose one, right? So they would start with me kind of getting a sense of like, well, what do I like to do? And then just let's map to that. The issue was I knew what I liked to do. I didn't know who I was when I was trying to follow all these different pursuits. So it was like, oh, if I like to do art, then go be an artist. If you want to do graphic design, go be a graphic designer. If you want. And so the old way of thinking is focus on your skills, focus on your passions, and focus on, what the workforce is saying is in demand or they need, and map yourself to that. And so it's sort of like choose one thing at a time is what I've heard as a lot of advice. The new advice and new thinking is twofold. One, you need to be able to know what you call yourself, and it can't be just a job title because job titles are very generic and everybody has different associations. So if you search for learning designer right now, you're going to find 25 variations on job descriptions for a learning designer. So if I'm just using that language about me, it doesn't really mean I know why I'm using the words learning designer. I'm trying to just play this game of cat and mouse. But when you step back and you actually know the words you're calling yourself. So I'm like, I'm a creative disruptor. I need to find jobs that embrace that identity of me. And I know that being a creative disruptor in my world has these 4 categories: the artist, the educator, the designer, the researcher. So I suddenly have a very new criteria and set of not just my passions, because you can have a lot of skills and those skills map to different identities. Just because someone can write and research and design, there could be 20 different ways to label that. So going back, I'm like getting a little long-winded in this. First, I think people need to know who they are. So I need to know my creative disruptor identity and the identities that frame that, which changed the way I looked for keywords and job searches. I found things on public relations and, director of like strategy. I was like, I would have never searched for those because that language was not coming up with my old job titles. But the second part of this, which is really big, is the permission to integrate. So instead of the old advice being choose one thing, do one thing at a time, or have a side hustle on your day job, I tell people you can embrace permission to integrate. You don't have to separate. So I find when I figured out my hybridity, every role, and I've had like 3 or 4 since this aha moment, I have had 3 or 4 hybrid jobs. Every one of those jobs has embraced all 4 of my identity components because I had more awareness. I needed a job that would look for that. And that part of that was a negotiation in interviews. A lot of those roles were even designed as a new role, and I got to make them what I wanted them to be. So that's different. I've never had career advice that was framed that way. Did that help answer a little bit?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You added one thing about the unicorn. I want to come back to that. I think your hybrid expertise is what makes you a unicorn. So most people can't explain what makes them a unicorn. They're just like, oh, I'm just so good. I'm a one of a kind. So my argument and question back to them is how? What makes you a unicorn? If you can decipher who you are at the intersections, that is your unique hybrid unicornness. Then I feel that you can literally validate that question. You can be like, I'm legitimately a unicorn.
Because I also see people who are over 50 or over 55. There's this whole market emerging of people who have done a lot of things and have a lot of experience. And to say, yeah, well, I'm just, I've been around the block a few times, isn't really helping the ageism. And it isn't really helping people in those age groups move forward with something that's exciting.
Yeah, we've got to
I'm
get.
going to echo that.
Hi, James.
I said, I'm going to echo that. There's a lot of like 30-something CEOs out there right now who you don't know what experience is until you have it. And so I think that it's like, they don't get it.
Yeah, we have just, a lot of our identity it's a back and forth. There's actually a lot of research that we go through these spiral loops where we go through identity exploration and we learn more things and we get experiences, and then we go to identity achievement, or we sort of, there's a word I'm trying to think of that I'll come back to, commitment. We come to a commitment of a new identity, and then we get more experience and we explore again, we get to a new commitment and a new achievement. And then sometimes people foreclose. It means they just take whatever identity they've been given and they don't explore. And this is happening multiple times throughout our career, and this is not being discussed. We talk about career transition, we talk about workforce mobility, but I'm reading more and more research that's coming up that we literally don't have processes embedded in workforce development that is also about their identity development, and they go hand in hand. So this is why this work is more critical than ever, and it's going to become more and more part of the norm. This is just literally the new day and the cutting edge of the work. So you all are early adopters, I'll put it that way. Yeah. And I think it is happening at all ages. I think there are different, so I also study a lot of human developmental theory because that's part of identity research. And we are in a different state of mind and state of our life in our 20s and our 30s and our 40s, et cetera. Some of it's about experience. Some of it is about just our own conscious development, like how we are synthesizing and understanding ourselves. And making sense of ourselves is not something we're trained to do. We just kind of assume it happens. But I'm trying to make it more explicit, like, here's how you can deliberately, intentionally pay attention to how you have become who you are. Like, are you noticing X, Y, and Z? Here are activities we're going to do together to unpack that. Good stuff, you. Hayward, hi, welcome. I know you're probably just listening, but I want to do a shout out. And Geneva, I know you're in the background too, so it's good to have you here. I'll stay on for another moment. I know we're at the top of the hour. This has been wonderful. I'm so thankful that you all are interested and you've been following and just you're taking time out of your day to be here. So thank you. So final note, I will send an email after today's recording with the recording, and I'll send a follow-up link. And please, you can respond to that email or just reach out to me even sooner at Sarabeth at morethanmytitle.com. I am here. I love this work and I believe in it so much. And whatever I can do to support you, please let me know. Okay. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you for being here. Bye.